This special edition podcast is brought to you by the Pro Bono Institute. PBI is a nonprofit organization that supports, enhances, and helps to transform the pro bono efforts of major law firms, in-house corporate legal departments, and public interest organizations in the U.S. and around the world. Welcome to PBI's podcast, The Challenge of COVID-19 Legal Community in Action. Episode 5. I'm your host, Nihad Mansour, PBI's Assistant Director of the law firm Pro Bono Project. Today I'm speaking with Becky Troth, Executive Director of the DC Bar Pro Bono Center. The DC Bar Pro Bono Center is the largest provider of pro bono legal help in the district, serving more than 20,000 individuals, nonprofits, and small businesses each year through staff and volunteer lawyers. When Becky and I last spoke in April, the DC Bar Pro Bono Center had already done so much to mitigate the pandemic's effects as they related to their ability to serve their clients. They were scheduling one-on-one appointments with clients and dedicating new phone lines to serving clients who normally would attend the advice and referral clinics or the court-based resource centers. They were maximizing website resources like probono.net/DC and lawhelp.org/DC for trainings, resources, and updates for volunteers and pro se litigants. Their legal information helpline was still operating 24 hours, and their nonprofit and small business legal assistance programs were conducting their claims remotely. They had just launched the Family Law Assistance Network, or FLAN, the partnership with Legal Aid of DC and the Affordable Law Firm. With 7 months since April and October being Pro Bono month, I wanted to check back in with Becky to see how things were going. She had many updates to share with me on the DC Bar Pro Bono Center's programs that have allowed for staff and pro bono volunteers to continue serving the community.
We've gotten overtaken by events,
That's good.
and that has happened all the time during the pandemic.
So true.
OBE.
In April, you described how the pandemic has affected the DC Bar Pro Bono Center's ability to serve the community, primarily talking about the impact of having to work remotely and dealing with the court closings. Since then, have there been any new pandemic-related challenges to your ability to serve the community?
Sure. Well, I think the main thing we're seeing is the effects of the digital divide. Our clients often have no Wi-Fi or they have inconsistent access to Wi-Fi. And that presents problems both for communicating with us, their lawyers, and for participating in hearings at the court. And the DC Superior Court and the Court of Appeals, they're both keenly aware of the problems that our clients are having accessing remote hearings. And the Superior Court has set up remote locations with Wi-Fi access for people who don't have Wi-Fi. But it's still an issue for those who can't take advantage of that if they're immune compromised or otherwise can't leave their homes. So we're trying to figure out if we can engage internet service providers to find a way to ensure that our clients can access justice in this new remote environment. So the digital divide is going to be an issue for quite a while. Second, it has been a challenge to place our cases, especially disability benefits cases, with our pro bono volunteers. So even though there's a moratorium on evictions and debt collection cases, we still have public benefits cases, family law cases, consumer law and housing conditions cases that are going forward, and we need help serving those clients. So, there's so much going on in everyone's lives, and trying to focus on the pro bono help we need is something we hope that our volunteers will focus on.
Absolutely. Could you tell me more about how your pro bono programs are going?
Sure. So before the pandemic, the DC Bar Pro Bono Center was working with other legal service providers, Legal Aid of DC, Rising for Justice, Neighborhood Legal Services, Bread for the City, and Legal Counsel for the Elderly to form a coalition to establish a single point of entry for people with landlord-tenant issues. And we were set to launch those services at the courthouse before the pandemic struck. And we were going to launch on March 16th, the same day that the court closed its doors in response to the pandemic. So in the week after the court closed its doors to in-person hearings, we established a dedicated phone line to help our landlord tenant resource center clients. And between the end of March and June 1st, that line fielded 400 calls from people with housing issues. But at the same time, the Coalition of Legal Services Providers was working to establish a system to accommodate the intake and referral of phone requests for legal help. And we agreed on how to share responsibility for what we eventually called the Landlord Tenant Legal Assistance Network. LT-LAN is what we call the acronym. And LT-LAN launched its live help services on June 1st. And the Pro Bono Center serves as the central point of contact for all the tenants and small landlords who call with housing issues. And since June 1st, the hotline has responded to more than 980 calls from tenants and small landlords. And the lawyers, the LT-LAN lawyers, normally return calls within an hour. So we're able to provide legal advice and information, and if appropriate, a referral for full or limited scope representation within an hour, which is really, we think, quite an accomplishment on the part of all of our partners in this coalition. And then we did talk some in April about the nonprofit small business legal assistance programs, and that at the start of the pandemic, we were developing programs to serve the small businesses and nonprofits affected by the pandemic. And over the summer, the Pro Bono Center was keenly aware of the need for help with applying for the payroll protection program. And we serve nearly 200 nonprofits and small businesses, helping them through the application process. And what's interesting is 42% of those applicants didn't even know before we told them about it that they would be eligible for the program. And in addition to helping with the Payroll Protection Act, we've been helping with a lot of issues that small businesses and nonprofits are dealing with, like, how can they reopen? Can they reopen partly? What do they have to worry about in terms of protecting their employees? A lot of small businesses and nonprofits are worrying about paying their rent and whether they can renegotiate their rent. So since the beginning of the pandemic, we've served a record 680 nonprofits and small businesses. So that program has been a huge help to our community in terms of being a place where they can, these are small businesses and nonprofits that can't afford a lawyer, and to have this resource has been a great benefit. And I do have to say, I think I said in April, our staff has been incredibly innovative and creative and dedicated. They've been working day and night to make sure that we can continue to reach our clients.
Do you at all feel like your ability to cope with the pandemic has plateaued, or would you say you're still on the step part of the learning curve?
Oh, I think we're still on a learning curve. We're still figuring out how to convert our various clinics to remote services. We have advice and referral clinics that we usually held in person every month in Shaw and Anacostia. And people could come in with any civil legal problem. And we had, 60 volunteer lawyers who would volunteer at those two clinics, and we'd serve more than 100 people every month. And we had mentors and the lawyers and the clients all in one place. And that was a pretty efficient way to give quick advice and, if necessary, referral. But when you can't do it all in one place and you're trying to figure out the logistics of having a mentor respond to the volunteers' questions, and we have our staff do the intake several days before so we know what issue they're dealing with. Because with the in-person clinics, they just come in with any issue, and then we've got all these mentors and we can figure it out as we go along. But when we're doing it remotely, the logistics are a lot more complicated. So we've done our immigration clinic remotely. We'll be doing it again in December. And then we did our first general advice and referral clinic at the beginning of this month. And so we didn't serve as many clients as we would in person. So our hope is that we can sort of streamline our procedures a little bit and can serve more people. But the thing is, most people do have phones. So even if they don't have Wi-Fi access, they can call in and talk to a lawyer. The Wi-Fi is for video, and it's for looking at documents, for transmitting documents, and for appearing in court hearings. But it is helpful, even when talking with clients, to be able to just see them face to face. It just makes it seem like they know who their lawyer is, and it gives them, I think, a level of comfort.
In April, you noted an uptick in eviction questions, bankruptcy, employment, child custody, family law matters, and government benefits. Now that the courts have reopened remotely in DC, what legal services have been in highest demand?
Sure. Well, there's still a moratorium on eviction and debt collection actions, and those are the cases that we think are going to be the highest volume. So we're not really dealing with a tsunami right now, but as I mentioned, we still really need pro bono volunteers to handle the other types of cases. Housing conditions cases are going forward, and because many tenants are not able to pay their rent, landlords are less inclined to repair housing code violations. So housing conditions cases are going forward. There are a lot of family law cases. Because of the pandemic, a lot of the cases in domestic relations, the domestic relations branch, are emergency matters, trying to work out visitation and custody issues, and the pressure, the stress during the pandemic, trying to deal with a former spouse or the parent, the other parent of your child. There's a real concern about, I'm sure you've heard about domestic violence and child abuse. So these issues require help. And I think we talked about our Family Law Assistance Network, and that work that we're doing with the DC Affordable Law Firm and the Legal Aid Society of DC. We've fielded hundreds of calls through the FLAN, Family Law Assistance Network, FLAN, through their hotline. And then a litigant can call in through the hotline, and then it will be distributed through among the three legal services organizations to make sure that nobody has a conflict, and then the next person in line will take that case. And so we've been handling emergency cases in the domestic relations branch, sometimes with 10 minutes notice. Our staff, the attorneys of the day, have appeared in court without a whole lot of advance notice. So it's been a huge service, but that program was scheduled to open in a court-based office before the pandemic. And then we figured out how to provide those attorney of the day services virtually. We do need help in family law cases and in public benefits, and those cases continue to be, we need help in those areas.
Now that you have this experience handling court matters remotely, in what ways do you hope that the court operations will permanently improve as a result of this pandemic?
Well, it will be interesting to see what we learn from this. I do think that we are figuring out that you don't necessarily need to have the person physically present to provide services or to conduct a hearing. I mean, I know that there are circumstances in which you want the lawyers and the litigants and the witnesses there, but I think we're learning that we can cut back on the times that people have to be physically present, given the difficulties our clients face in terms of transportation and childcare and taking time off from work. And to the extent we can limit the amount of time that they have to devote to accessing justice, I think the better off our clients are going to be, and the more effective the system's going to be.
In April, you mentioned the tremendous collaboration in DC with the consortium of legal service providers, along with the efforts of the DC Access to Justice Commission and the ABA COVID-19 Task Force led by Jim Sandman. Are there any notable partnerships or collaborative projects that you've established as a result of the pandemic since then?
So in addition to the LT-LAN, which I mentioned, Landlord Tenant Legal Assistance Network, we are getting close to launching the DC Represents initiative that the DC Access to Justice Commission is spearheading, COVID-19 Task Force. And DC Represents is a campaign that's mobilizing law firms, individual lawyers, government attorneys, corporations, associations, law schools, and public interest organizations, the members of the consortium, to strengthen their existing pro bono commitment to address the influx of COVID-19 related legal needs. So we have engaged with the legal services providers to the members of the consortium to find out what their needs are, what their greatest needs are. And we are working with them to post the pro bono opportunities on probono.net, which the DC Bar Pro Bono Center manages. And so that legal services providers can just go on to that site themselves and post their needs. And pro bono volunteers can then just go to Pro Bono Net and see what organizations are looking for volunteers and in what areas. And then we're also posting the trainings so that people can be prepared when the eviction and debt collection moratoriums end. So I must say the Access to Justice Commission has been working incredibly hard to get this going. Nancy Drain is their executive director, and I think has been working day and night to convince law firms and pro bono volunteers to up their commitment to our community in a time of crisis.
Could you tell me more about how the DC Bar Pro Bono Center has worked to expand and incorporate its racial justice efforts during this time?
Our staff was very, very concerned after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and we did, we are talking about having internal discussions and figuring out ways that we can reaffirm our commitment to racial justice. I mean, our work has always been at least implicitly about racial justice, but now we're making it more explicit that we know that this is, you know, the problems our clients face are often the results of, are usually the results of institutionalized racism. And so the work that we do is trying to address the effects of that racism. And we are working with our community, we're working to increase outreach. We're distributing flyers throughout the community in several languages, and we're distributing them to community centers, to places of worship, and to government offices to let everyone in the community know that we're available to help.
There's so much that's happened since March. It's a time of so much uncertainty. You know, there are highs and lows of this emotional roller coaster that we're all on. What has helped you or your staff and your volunteers to maintain endurance and hope throughout this time?
I'm not sure there's any one thing
Yeah.
that we're doing. I'm certainly going for a lot of walks. I've gotten more exercise than I've ever gotten, and I'm lucky enough to live by a creek, and I can walk along the creek every day, and I see deer and fox, and so that's been a huge benefit for me. But I do think that knowing how great the need is a great motivator during the pandemic. We also recognize the toll that the pandemic is taking on all of us, and that people need to take care of themselves so that they can help others. One thing we've done, the Bar's Lawyer Assistance Program offers resources to help when we're feeling overwhelmed. And one of their counselors did a session with our staff a couple weeks ago on how to cope and remain effective during stressful times, which I thought was really helpful.
Wow.
And we have the Pro Bono Partnership, which is a partnership of law firms and legal services organizations, the federal government.
Wow.
And we did our annual program with Dr. Larry Richard, who is a lawyer and a psychologist. And the program is entitled, Put Your Own Oxygen Mask On First, Making Pro Bono Work in Stressful Times. So we are exploring ways to support the staff and our volunteers, understanding that this work is never easy, but it is especially difficult in the middle of a pandemic. So we're trying to be conscious of the challenges people are facing and give grace at a time like this. My new motto, instead of don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, don't let the good be the perfect of the okay.
I love that. Looks like I'm going to have to change my sign over here on my desk that says the perfect is the enemy of the good.
Yeah. So just giving each other, some to be them, to take care of themselves, and to understand that we're not all operating at maximum capacity right now.
Right. Yeah. There is such a compassion, towards others, and just being gentle with our growth and the growth of others.
Right. Absolutely. It's a difficult time But the community has been coming together. And right now, I think there's a lot of interest in trying to meet the needs of our neighbors here in DC. And we are so appreciative of our volunteers and our donors. And we know that with everyone's help, we'll get through this.
We will. Thank you to Becky Troth for her thoughtful remarks and leadership on the coronavirus pandemic. Check out the DC Bar Pro Bono Center website for more information and volunteer opportunities. Developments in the coronavirus are moving fast, but the legal community is adapting to move with it. Please watch for more COVID-19 focused episodes as we continue to shine light on the legal sector's response to this evolving crisis. We also hope that, if you're not already doing so, you will join with those already taking action. More resources on how to help are available at www.probonoinst.org. Thanks for listening, stay safe, and be well.